Webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi guys, I'm really excited. There's a lot of people who've signed up to be here, so I'm really excited that y'all are interested in joining me for this first ever webinar style presentation. So a few housekeeping things. Everybody's going to be put on mute throughout this entire presentation, just so we're not worried about any background noise or anything like that. So everybody's going to be permanently on mute. That being said, we really definitely want you guys asking questions. So on your screen, there should be a little toolbox. Towards the bottom of it will be a drop down where you can type in information and chat with each other. If you guys have any questions, just drop your question in the chat box and we will go over that at the end of the presentation. So that being said, I'm really excited that you guys are joining us. My name is Karleigh Jurek. I am a registered dietitian. I am full-time with BP here in Houston. Really excited to be connecting with you guys virtually. I know things are kind of a little weird right now. And originally when I was working with the fitness center to come up with topics for April, I had really been wanting to do a presentation on mindful eating. And we actually originally chose this topic back in January before things really started ramping up with COVID-19. And it just so happened that this was a really relevant subject. And so I'm really excited to be talking about it and going over what mindful eating looks like and sharing some information with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and say bye to y'all and get on with the presentation. All right, so mindful eating to me it's become kind of a buzzword and it's a little bit more trendy. I hear people talking about mindfulness and mindful eating, but I know personally when I sat down to start working on this presentation, I didn't really actually have a great definition for that. So what I really wanted to do is kind of look at this very, very broadly with a very broad lens and then kind of slowly narrow down to what it actually all looks like, what mindful eating is, and then ways for you to incorporate it into your life. So that being said, we're going to start with, here we go. Okay, so we're going to start really, really broad. I know I really didn't necessarily have a definition for what mindfulness was. I used it in passing. I thought I had a definition for it, but I really want to spend some time explaining what that looks like, giving you a good firm definition as we move on to mindful eating. So this is Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of it. What I really like about this is the first definition. It's really broad, very general, the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. But then once you go down to that number two definition, you get a little bit more specific in that it's a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting. And this picture, I think, does a really good job of portraying what that actually looks like. So is your mind full with your to-do list, your stresses, your things that are on your mind, or is your mind filled with what's in front of you and what's going on at that precise moment? And that's really kind of what mindfulness is it's just being focused and aware on what's going on at that exact moment instead of thinking about all this other stuff that you have to do in the future or that you're happened in the past. Okay, so mindfulness really originated on Buddhist meditation practice. So the whole thought process was to be present from moment to moment throughout the day. You're very accepting of your thoughts and emotions without having any judgment of those thoughts. As I was putting this together, I really felt like that spoke to me in the accepting of your thoughts and emotions with no judgment. I was identifying emotions going through this whole COVID scenario, but then also feeling guilty for feeling that way. And so I think for mindfulness, the key here is that you allow yourself to have those thoughts, those emotions, but you don't pass any judgment on yourself for them. And that's kind of the key to mindfulness, is just being aware, acknowledging, and then not trying to change anything that you're feeling or thinking. And so it was really based in Buddhist meditation practice, but now in more modern day society, its health benefits have really been established, and it's now being used as a way to help with stress management, help with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, mental health disorders, and even just a way to practice self-care. A lot of people use it as a way to just kind of take care of themselves mentally and physically, so they're not feeling overwhelmed with the day-to-day that's going on around them. And so the whole purpose of mindfulness is that you're present in the here and now. And I know I've repeated that 100 times, but I really want to emphasize, as a society, we're really gotten very we've gotten in the habit of mindless functioning. So a great example, when we were going to Westlake One, I was thinking about how I personally have to park in the same part of the parking garage, because if I don't do that, I'm already thinking about work after I park and I'm walking in the building, and I won't pay attention to where I park. And so at the end of the day, it takes me a couple minutes to find where my car is parked. And to me, that's a really good example of the mindless functioning. We're so used to getting in the groove of things and driving to work and then not really necessarily remembering how we got there. And so the key to mindfulness is that you're not doing this mindless functioning, that you're focused on the present, the here and now, and you're not just going about your day. You're not going through the paces. I'm getting a little tongue-tied on that one. So mindfulness is not something you practice once a day. It's something that you incorporate throughout your entire day. It's something that you do from the moment you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep, and that it's not just something that you check off on your to-do list. It's definitely kind of a practice that's integrated into your every functioning. But it's really important to acknowledge that this does not mean that you won't have stress or difficult times. This is a way for you to manage and to cope and to handle those stressful times. So it's something that makes you feel more equipped for the trials that are going to come throughout your day. And previously, before 10 years ago, there was really no research on the benefit of mindfulness. But in the last 10 years, it has really exploded in the amount of studies that have been conducted on mindfulness. And so it's really become a lot more mainstream, and a lot of people are using it as ways to treat stress, depression, improve body image, treat eating disorders, things like that. So it's a really solid way to help manage a lot of different things, and it's something that's definitely being researched and proven to help with a whole slew of different ailments that people might have. Okay, so we've looked at this really broadly, and kind of talked about what mindfulness is. Let's zoom in a little bit closer and talk about how can you incorporate mindfulness into eating, and what does mindful eating look like? So remember with mindfulness that the focus is always, on the here and now, what you're doing at that moment. So when you apply that to eating, basically what that is that you are focusing on your food wherever you're eating. You're aware of what you're eating, but not in the sense of, oh, I'm on a diet and I'm watching what I eat. It's more in the sense that you're focusing on the relationship to the food, how the food tastes, how it feels, how it makes you feel, any emotions that it brings up. And you're really focusing on that instead of any kind of good or bad food that you might be putting in your body. And so you're eating any and all foods. It's not eliminating any food groups, and it's focusing on the experience of eating the food, what your cravings are, how hungry are you when you're eating, how hungry are you as you're eating, are you still hungry after you've eaten, and it's really honing into how you're feeling as you're eating food and enjoying the experience of the food as you're eating. And really, one of the things that I love about mindful eating, and part of the reason why I'm a big supporter of it, is because I think it's bringing you back to when you were first born. If you think about if you've had children when they're newborns and still very young, they have this innate ability to determine when they're hungry and when they're full. So with the newborn baby, they cry when they're hungry, you feed them, and then when they're done, they either go to sleep or they won't take any more. So they have this perfect sense of knowing how to feed themselves, how to nourish themselves, and what their body needs. And as a newborn, they don't have any labels on the food. To them, all foods are nourishing, and that's a way for them to stop feeling hungry. But over time, and as that newborn gets older and becomes a toddler, a teenager, and they grow up, they start getting exposed to all kinds of different messages from all of different types of places. But they, over time, start to lose the ability to listen to those internal cues and what the body needs. And then we start labeling foods as good and bad. And when you start labeling the foods from good to bad, you also begin to dissociate from the cues and signals that your body's sending, which means that you also start learning to eat past when you're full, or you are no longer able to recognize when you're truly hungry. And so you've really kind of dissociated yourself from your body, and that's where you can start experiencing things like mindless eating and things like that, just because we've really become so dissociated from what our body naturally is asking for. And so mindful eating is bringing yourself back to that innate sense in your body's capabilities of being able to feed itself and to nourish itself. Okay, so this is an activity if you really want to integrate mindful eating into your day-to-day. A few disclaimers on this. First off, I'll full transparency. I have a very angry, hangry 16-month-old toddler who really just needs to be fed and entertained throughout meals. So a lot of what I'm going through is maybe not something that you can incorporate every single day. So for this activity, maybe it's something where if you have young kids that need lots of attention while you're eating, or you only get a short window to actually eat your food, maybe you make the agreement with your significant other that, one day they're going to be in charge of mealtime for the kiddos, and you're going to go into another room to eat your meal. So then you can actually go through this activity and practice this mindful eating. Don't feel like this is any pressure to do this every day, because it's honestly for me not something that I can personally do, but it is just a good exercise for you to go through. So for your next meal, sit down with no distractions. The key there is no distractions. So no music on in the background, no TV on. Leave your phone in the other room. For me, I personally have an Apple Watch. So one thing I would probably do during this is I would take my watch off, or I would turn it on airplane mode, so I'm not getting any notifications or anything like that. So I can really just be focusing on the food that I'm eating. And then once you do that, make sure there's no distractions. Take one bite of your meal and set your fork down. My sweet husband was really great about going through this presentation before I'm presenting to you guys now. And when he got to that part, he really thought I was crazy for saying, set your fork down, and then you'll notice a little bit lower it says pause for 2 to 3 minutes between bites. It's unheard of to him, and I think that's part of the reason why I included it is we're so used to inhaling our food that we don't even half the time take the time to enjoy the food. So that's the whole point of this exercise is it's forcing yourself to slow down. It's forcing yourself to chew the food and really just when you're chewing the food, focus on the flavors, focus on the textures. Is there a crunch? Is there a melty cheese texture? Are you feeling any emotions when you're eating this food? Are you enjoying the food that you're eating? And it's really just focusing all of your attention on whatever you're choosing to eat. And so you enjoy it a lot more. You learn what kind of flavors you want. And as you're going through your meal, you don't talk to anybody and like you are completely focused on the meal that you're enjoying and processing and focusing on that. And then one of the biggest keys is continue this, throughout the whole meal. Take a bite, chew it really well, focus on the flavors and the textures and the smells, and pause for 2 to 3 minutes in between bites. And the reason why this is so important is that gives you the opportunity for your food to go down into your stomach. And so it can take up to 10 minutes for your stomach to communicate to your brain that it's full. So by eating this slowly, you're giving your body the opportunity to connect your stomach to your brain. And so that allows you to notice like, oh, I'm starting to feel full. I don't really want to eat anymore. And that will really help you from going past the feeling of fullness. And here a little bit later, we'll go through kind of a scale of what that can look like. And then once you finish eating, take a moment to sit back and reflect on the food. Did I enjoy eating that food? Is this something that I actually like the taste of? Do I feel good after the meal? Do I feel satisfied? Do I still feel hungry? And as you're going through this exercise and you kind of answer all those questions, like this is what mindful eating looks like if you really want to incorporate it 100%, as you are focused 100% on what you're eating and there is no distraction and that is the only thing that you're thinking about. So I really did want to also mention sometimes people use mindful eating as a way to lose weight, which it can be a great tool for that, but it's important to understand that mindful eating is not a diet. It's not going to be focused on eliminating certain foods. You're not going to go dairy free, which is great if you have any kind of adverse reaction to it. But that's where the mindful eating is so key, is it's honing in on how your body feels after foods to where you can maybe identify that you have those sensitivities, but it's by no means solely focused on eliminating foods. The key for mindful eating is that you eat very slowly, you limit distractions, you listen to your body, you listen to, am I hungry? How hungry am I? Am I hungry for just a snack, or am I hungry enough that I need a full meal? And learning how to identify how much food you should eat to no longer be hungry. And then learning how when you're truly hungry versus a different type of hunger. What I mean by a different type of hunger is, did I just have a really stressful meeting and my stress is really high and I'm looking for something to eat to kind of help alleviate that stress? Or am I emotional and sad for whatever reason and I'm going to eat something because I feel like that's going to make me feel better? Or are you eating because you're bored? Those are different types of hunger versus like true hunger. That's not to say that those are bad types of hunger. It's just learning how to differentiate those. So you're not necessarily feeling guilty when you go and have a stress sweet or you enjoy something because you're bored. It's just learning how to identify those different types. And then it's engaging all your senses. smelling the food before you eat it, looking at all the textures, and how does the food sound when I'm eating it? How does it look? How does it taste? And really focusing on all, like engaging all five of your senses when you're eating. Um, and then it's also identifying any kind of food guilt or anxiety around food. So, maybe there's a food that you've taught yourself is the worst food that you could ever eat. And so it's helping you hone in to learn what that food is and kind of challenge why you felt that way. Why did I think bananas were so bad for me? And learning how to identify those foods and challenge them and how to incorporate them in a healthful way back into your diet. But then it's also eating foods to maintain your health and well-being. So yes, mindful eating seems like it could be a free-for-all to where you can eat anything and everything, but there is an aspect of, how do these foods make me feel? Do I want to maintain my health and well-being? Do I want to feel good after I eat this? And that's a really important key to mindful eating is, learning how to still eat foods that maintain that and still make you feel good. And then learning to eat foods that are both pleasing and nourishing to you. Noticing how foods make you feel and impact how you function throughout the day. So a really great example, I know I had this presentation right at lunchtime, so I needed to eat a little bit of an earlier lunch. But instead of eating really quickly in a really big, heavy lunch with a lot of carbs and not a lot of protein, I ate a light lunch that I knew was going to keep me from getting hungry, but that was going to make me feel energized through this presentation. So I wasn't fighting through, the drowsy slump post lunch while I was giving this presentation. And then it's appreciating your food instead of loathing what you eat. And I included this here, and I think of my father when I talk about this. He, bless my mother's soul, is really trying to eat better and eat for his health. And so he's been trying to incorporate more salmon into his diet. Salmon is a really great protein. It's got some great omega-3s to it. And so he's been trying to eat more of it. But the problem is my dad absolutely hates salmon. He does not enjoy eating it. My mother has worked very diligently to prepare it countless different ways to see if it's something that he likes. And it really just boils down to he doesn't like that food, which is fine. There's no problem with that. But part of mindful eating is learning how to identify foods that people are telling you are healthy, but it might not be something that you actually enjoy eating. And so it's learning how to identify that and tailor it to what's going to work for you. So we have all really become disconnected from our bodies, and we eat from different external cues. So that could be anything from, having a really high stress job or having a stressful day or something like that is what's driving us to eat instead of what is your body asking you to eat. And so when we eat now, we don't really listen to that. We have really tuned out our bodies and what it's craving, what it's asking for, how hungry are we or how much are you eating. So some really great things that I think if you just want to start maybe incorporating more mindful eating, to ask yourself before you sit down to eat, am I actually hungry? Am I truly physically hungry, or am I experiencing more of a boredom hunger or a stress hunger? And identifying what kind of hungry you are and are you hungry? And then from there going, how hungry am I? Do I just need a really quick snack and that's going to get me by? Or am I absolutely starving? I need a meal before I can really continue on. And then the next thing is, does my body need this? And what I mean by does my body need this is, is this going to make me feel good? Am I going to feel good after eating this? And sometimes that does mean you sit down and you eat a big bowl of ice cream, and that's perfectly fine. That's the beauty of mindful eating. But it's really learning how to answer that question through listening to what your body is telling you. And then asking yourself, why am I eating this? Am I eating because I want to nourish my body and I want to go out and run a marathon? Or am I eating this because I want to enjoy a really nice meal with my family? Those are going to be really different things, but it's a really important question to ask before you sit down and eat. And then, how do I want to feel after this meal? Do I want to feel really slow and sluggish, or do I want to feel energized, ready to conquer the day? Those are some really important things that I think as you're going through this will help you kind of learn how to fuel your body based off of what your needs are, what you're looking for. And then the other key for mindful eating is you remove any labels from food. So there's no longer going to be a good food, a bad food. There's no eating clean or eating unhealthy. It puts all foods on an even playing field. So there's no longer one food that's better than the other. And so the reason for this and the purpose for this is when you remove any labels from food, you eliminate any guilt for eating those foods. But then you'll also learn that there might be foods that you were eating and you were eating them just because you thought they were healthy. And when it boils down to it, you might not actually enjoy eating those foods. So once you put all foods on an even playing field and you eliminate those labels, it gives you that opportunity to kind of start learning your body, your taste, your preferences a little bit better than what maybe somebody else has told you should be eating. And then this can actually help you reduce types of binge eating or mindless eating. The reason being is you're learning how to nourish your body. Your body is a really intuitive machine, essentially, that is really good about telling you what your body needs for a lot of different vitamins, minerals, etc. And so if you learn to listen to your body and what those cues are telling you, you're more likely to binge eat or mindless eat because you're fueling your body to what it needs versus ignoring it, eating what you think you should be eating, and then at the end of the day, still going back to the pantry to, binge on whatever food is in your pantry. It helps eliminate that. And so this is really important to me, coming from being just a nerdy dietitian person, is, there's a lot of really great research on the benefits of mindful eating. And so I really wanted to briefly go into that. So this first one was a systematic review that identified mindful eating as an effective treatment for binge eating, emotional eating, and then the eating due to external cues. What the external cues could look like is having a really emotional day or getting in a fight with a friend or having a stressful day. Those are going to be those external cues. But there was not enough evidence to justify that this was a way to be used for weight management, but it did help with the binge eating and the emotional eating. And then this next study was a randomized controlled study in obese women who incorporated mindful eating, and it was found that their fasting blood glucose levels was much lower, and then they actually had a decreased sweet consumption. And then in the third study, what I really liked about this third study was that it looked at all of the weight metrics, like the weight, the BMI, and all that. But those last two items, the interleukin-6 and the C-reactive protein, those are markers that we use to identify stress and inflammation in the body. And so in the women who incorporated mindful eating, they had much lower levels of the interleukin-6 and the C-reactive protein, as well as the lower weight, BMI, etc. So mindful eating is not only improving, those weight metrics, but it's also lowering your stress level. It's making something that we do 3 times, 4+ times a day eating, it really takes out the stress of it, and it's no longer, every meal is a stressful event because you're not so focused on what you're eating, you're more focused on how you're eating and how it's making you feel. So the benefits of mindful eating, it's forcing you to reconnect with your body and like learn to listen to what it's telling you. It's teaching you how to identify when you're hungry and when you're full, or these satiety cues. It gives you food freedom, so you no longer feel guilty for eating and for nourishing your body. It helps you nourish your body, mind, and heart. There's a reason I included more than just body. There's foods that are good for your mind and for your heart. And I'm obviously for like brain power and functioning, but what I'm talking about, I call them mental health foods. So foods that I've heard people say like, oh, I had a piece of chocolate. I shouldn't have had that, but I always tell people, you know, those are food for your mental health. Those are food for your benefit. And so food helps nourish your body, but it also can help nourish so many other aspects of your life. It empowers you to make helpful choices based on your body's needs and your preferences. You know, the key here for any nutrition, any diet, anything that you eat is individualizing to yourself. You know, nobody's going to know your tastes, your preferences better than yourself. And so for me, mindful eating is really taking ownership of, you know, this is my body. I know what my body needs to feel nourished and to feel energized. And so that's a really important aspect of this. And it shifts food choice and control from external sources to your body's innate needs. So you're no longer letting the outside world tell you how to eat, when to eat, and you're focusing on what your body needs when your body needs it. Okay, so a few tips to get started. These are things that you don't necessarily need to do all at once. These are just maybe one or two of these things you can incorporate to kind of help maybe bring you into mindful eating. So one of the first things is set a timer for 20 minutes, and that's the amount of time that you take to eat. You know, maybe it's something where going back to the activity, you take a bite and you put it down and you enjoy 2 to 3 minutes in between each bite. Or maybe it's you give yourself 10 minutes to eat the first half, and then you take a 5-minute break to really let your body digest, and then you eat more after that. You know, however that looks like for you. But the key is that you're eating slowly. The timer is there to help slow you down, make you think about what you're eating and how much you're eating. This next tip is eat with your non-dominant hand or use chopsticks if you're not used to using them. This is not something that's necessarily there to maybe encourage you to eat less. The intent of this tip is to make you think about the process of eating. So I know when I was putting this together and I imagined myself eating with my left hand, I kind of had to stop and like really think about the process. And that's what we're looking for, something to get you to focus on what you're doing and draw the attention to you eating. And that's where this can help you be more mindful as you're eating. The next thing, eat silently for 5 minutes, where you think about the process that it took to produce the meal. You know, say you have a side salad and you're thinking about the greens growing in the field and how it has to be picked, and then it has to be processed, and then it has to go to the grocery store. Well, even before that, it has to be processed, and then it's sent to the distribution of the center of the grocery store, which is then sent out to the individual store. And you really focus on all the different steps that have to be there before you can actually enjoy whatever food it is you're eating. You know, take small bites and really focus on chewing your food well. And before you grab a snack, ask yourself, am I really hungry? You know, especially working from home, we get a lot of questions on, you know, mindless eating, and I'm at my pantry every hour for a snack. You know, the benefit of mindful eating is that you're asking yourself, how hungry am I? Is it something that I'm bored or I'm stressed and I just need a break. If that's the case, then go do something else. Go walk around your block for 10 minutes. But asking yourself, am I really hungry, can be a really great way to make you stop and think about what your body needs. And this is a really good segue into, and I think anybody should be using the hunger scale, whether you're trying to incorporate mindful eating or you're just trying to eat better for your health. I always tell people to focus on the hunger scale. So it's a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is that you are starving, feeling weak, dizzy, feel like if you go for a walk, you're going to fall over or pass out because you're so hungry. And then 10 being you are so full that you are literally sick. Your stomach is hurting and you feel like you could almost like vomit back up what you just ate. So those are kind of the extremes. And really where we want people to stay on the hunger scale is we want to keep them between a 3 and a 6. So we want to keep you guys like when you're pretty hungry and your stomach's beginning to growl, then it's time that you sit down and eat something. But then in the reverse, when you are eating something, we want you to eat something to the point where you're feeling slightly full, you're feeling satisfied, you're not feeling uncomfortable. And so you're staying within that 3 to 6 range throughout the day, and which really helps keep you from getting hangry. Once you get down to a 2 where you're very hungry, you're irritable, you have low energy levels, that's really when you lose the ability to be mindful, and you're just going to eat anything and everything that's put in front of you. Whereas if you eat when you're at a 3, you can make those much more mindful choices. You can ask your body, what food sounds good now? How much do I want to eat? And kind of go through those series of questions. And then really briefly, I wanted to talk about intuitive eating. So a lot of times mindful eating and intuitive eating are used interchangeably. And they are very, very similar, but they are also a little bit, they're different in a lot of ways. So if you're eating mindfully, that doesn't always mean that you're eating intuitively. So intuitive eating is a self-care eating framework which integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought. It is not a diet, very similar to mindful eating, but it eliminates any food rules or food guidelines, and those are gone. Whereas, mindful eating, you still have the framework of, am I hungry? How does this food make me feel? Intuitive eating is a lot more loose in that sense, and that there's not even kind of a framework there. It's you learn to eat when you're hungry, you eat what you crave, you eat what you prefer, and that's it. So when your stomach's growling, you have a headache, nausea, cravings, irritability, like that's the sign that I'm hungry, and then you go eat whatever food sounds good. So the key to intuitive eating, and a lot of times people are very scared by it, you will eat things like cheeseburgers, pizza, desserts, especially when you're first incorporating this, you will tend to eat those foods more frequently because it's kind of like a pendulum or a seesaw that you're kind of leveling out, where if you've restricted for so long, once you're incorporating those foods back into your diet, there is going to be a period of time where you're going to eat those foods more frequently. That's okay. The key to intuitive eating is that you're just really focused on how your body feels after you eat those foods. Do I feel nourished? Do I feel energized? And those are kind of the differences. Like I said, they're intuitive eating and mindful eating can definitely go hand in hand, but they are very different in a lot of ways. And just real quick, these are some resources that I personally think would be really helpful for anybody who is looking for incorporating mindful eating, or if they're interested in learning more about it. I think times are really stressful right now with everything that's going on in the world. So I think mindful eating could be really beneficial for people now and then even in the future. So these are some really great resources. The Center for Mindful Eating, that's a website. If you just type that into your internet search bar, it should be one of the first links that comes up. They have some really great resources and more information on what mindful eating is, how you can incorporate it, etc. If you want to learn more about intuitive eating, that is actually a book that was written by two dietitians. And so I've listed that here. It's a really great book. I've read it personally, and I really highly recommend it. They even have a really good website, theintuitiveeating.org, if you want to learn more there. And then actually Headspace is really great for meditation, but they even have a section on mindful eating that I thought was very helpful if you guys wanted to look at that. And then this Health at Every Size, that is another book, and that's kind of another thought process on eliminating any kind of weight stigma, and instead of looking at weight or body size as a indication of health, it's more focused on, are we eating well? Are we exercising? And it kind of takes out the variable of weight. And that's another really great resource. And then this final bullet point, if you are a parent who's feeding children right now, I'm raising my hand because I'm one of those right now. This is another book written by a dietitian that is really helpful. It's called The Division of Responsibility. And if you're really interested in raising kids who aren't labeling foods good or bad, but who can still enjoy desserts without, going crazy, or, enjoying a sweet and still eating their vegetables, The Division of Responsibility is a really good read and a really good resource for giving you tools to help navigate those conversations with your kiddos. I'll admit I'm definitely kind of in the weeds with that one right now, but it's a really good read, and it's a really good resource to give you some tools while feeding your kiddos. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to pull up my question bar, and if you guys do have any questions, go ahead and type that into the question bar, and I'm going to try to pull this up real quick. Okay, there are quite a few questions, so let me make my way up to the top. Goodness. Oh, here we go. Okay, let me look at the questions again. I'm sorry, this is really small, so I can't see. All right, so one of my questions, where is Archie? I love that you guys are asking about him. He is very soundly napping in the other room while we're doing this. Thank you for asking. Okay. Sorry, I'm sorting through some of these technical questions. Okay, also, if you guys are interested, under the handouts tab on the webinar, there is a PDF copy of the presentation if you guys are interested, and then we can also send this out to people who have signed in after the presentation. So we have a question on how many banana pieces and peanut butter are too much to eat all at once, as your son demonstrated for us. This is a really good question, and I was actually having this conversation with a really good dietitian friend of mine. My son is very much a bottomless pit right now, but this is where the division of responsibility that I was talking about has really been very helpful for me. And so one of the proponents of that is that as the parent, I decide what he eats and when he eats, and then the child decides how much he eats. Now, that's not to say I wouldn't recommend letting your child shove as many peanut butter banana bites, maybe as my son did, because that could be a choking hazard. But for the most part, I really do stand by the fact that if he is still asking for more and wanting more, that's for him to decide, and then he can have more until he's found that he's hit his fullness. Okay, and I think that might be the only other questions. Oh, nope, I lied. Sorry guys, I'm still learning this program. So it looks like, let me apologize. It seems like we were having some technical difficulties. Yes, the PowerPoint slides will be sent out. We can send out that. Somebody asked if we will receive copies of the slides or if they will be available on Staywell. So you do have the handout down at the bottom that you can access, and then we can work on sending out the presentation to the distribution list. And so it looks like that might be all we had. Doesn't look like we have too many other questions. So here's one on how does intermittent fasting incorporate into this mindful eating philosophy? You know, honestly, I don't think that intermittent fasting and mindful eating will always perfectly align. Just because of the parameters from the intermittent fasting, you're setting certain times that you are allowed to eat foods. And so I think you're eliminating the ability to identify when you're hungry and honoring that hunger and going ahead and allowing yourself to eat when you're hungry. But that's not to say that you can't, when you're intermittent fasting, still eat mindfully, if that makes sense. So I know people who do intermittent fasting, and during the hours that they can eat, it's more of a free for all for them to eat whatever they want. And so I think, yes, you can still do intermittent fasting, but then I think you still need to hone into, how hungry am I? How much do I need to eat? So you can definitely incorporate it in that aspect, but it won't always align. Okay. Okay, so don't talk about eating. What about family dinner time? This is about connecting with your family while eating. I agree 100%. Enjoying family meals is a really important part of nourishing yourself. So it's definitely something that I would maybe do once just to try out as the activity, but it's not something I would tell you to do every day. It's just something for you to kind of try out and see what mindful eating could look like. But that is definitely not something I would do every day, because I agree, family time, family conversation is very important. Okay, sorry guys, this is taking me a little bit to go through these questions. Wellness center staff advised hunger pains might really be dehydrated. How to discern the difference? That's a really good question. I do agree with that. Sometimes our body identifies, can feel hungry, and what it is that we're actually dehydrated. So I think there's two different ways you can discern. The first is if you're starting to feel those initial signs of hunger, maybe you enjoy a glass of water and you wait 10 to 15 minutes before you actually go to get that snack. And that gives you enough time to get the fluids into your body and to help see if you're still hungry after that. If you're not hungry after that, then it might be something that you're dehydrated. Another way that you could try to tell if you're dehydrated, and this might be a little TMI, but is to look at the color of your urine. If it's something where your urine is a really bright yellow, that tends to be more dehydrated and you need to drink more water. Whereas if your urine is more of a clear color, that means that you're probably better hydrated. So that's one way to identify too. These are all really good questions. Is it a feeling certain foods are no good for me slash us, or better based on scientific research and facts? Um, Personally, and that's kind of a hard question to ask, but I think it's a really good question. I personally think that it's better to listen to how you're feeling. Research and scientific facts are really great, but the problem with those is they tend to look at a really large demographic. And humans are so unique and so individual that I think it's something where I would tell you to kind of own your own health and individualize to what works for you. So if it's something that you feel really not great after eating almonds or something like that, it's okay for you to just choose not to eat that because it doesn't make you feel good without really having a ton of scientific facts behind it. There are some limitations to that, obviously. Science is very important and helps us make a lot of really good decisions. And so that kind of depends on what you mean for certain foods. I think that was, if you wanted to reach out with more questions on that, I'm happy to send out my email address and help you address that a little bit more. Okay. So this question, high fat, cholesterol, sodium laden foods, although taste great and satiate hunger, fats state best to avoid these types. Yes, they do. And I think that's really the thing that people sometimes miss with intuitive eating and mindful eating is if you're eating those foods and you're really tuning into how your body's feeling, you'll actually notice that your body doesn't feel great when you're eating those foods, if that makes sense. But it's also giving you a little bit of freedom to eliminate any stress around food. So say you're on vacation with your family and you're going to a restaurant that has your favorite dish, say it's fried chicken or a cheeseburger with french fries. The intent here is eliminating any stress around that meal so you no longer feel bad for enjoying that meal. Yes, it's going to be higher fat, cholesterol, and sodium, but it's not something that should be stressful for you to eat, if that makes sense. It allows you to enjoy those foods. But the key to mindful eating and intuitive eating is that you're still nourishing your body to where you feel good most of the time. And that's where the high fat, cholesterol, sodium foods are kind of not so much an everyday thing because they don't make you feel as great. Okay, let's see if there's. This is a really good question. So, how do I quiet the voice in my head to try and justify all the food or quantity as they make me unhealthier than I am now? Um, I think it's really learning how to eliminate any food guilt. I think it's putting all foods on the same playing field is really going to help because then you're not going to have to justify anything. All foods are equal. And so it no longer becomes, I need to eat this and then I need to exercise XYZ amount of time to burn it off. I think it's just really learning how to not have any food that's good over the other. Okay. These are all really great questions. Thank you guys for sending them in. Okay, it looks like okay, so we have a question on what is interleukin 6. I don't know if I can give you a really great definition right off the top of my head, but it is a marker that they can measure in your bloodstream. And how they use that in treatment of disease is that's an indicator of stress, some kind of stress on the body, which tends to also cause inflammation in the body. And so it's an inflammation marker in the body that your body naturally produces. It's always going to be there, but it's just in much higher levels when you're under a stressful environment. How is advocating eating chocolate, ice cream, etc. okay when one's body doesn't need those items for proper nourishment? Um, I think that's kind of a subjective question because your body, ice cream, chocolate, those things are going to have nutrients that your body needs. It's going to have fat, it's going to have carbohydrates, and those are essential nutrients to our body. And the same for ice cream, that's a dairy product, so it's going to have vitamin D, calcium, etc. So there are beneficial components to those foods. And also, I think there's just an aspect of letting your body just enjoy foods that taste good. That can be really good for your mental and even your physical health. So it's not necessarily something that you should do 3 times a day, but there is definitely room for it in any person's regular eating. And then I've kind of already answered this question on I've been getting great results from intermittent fasting. It seems mindful eating might pair well with that. What are your thoughts? I think in some aspects, yes, but then in some other aspects, no. But if it's working well for you, I think absolutely continue with what's working for you and what works for your lifestyle. Okay, this is a follow-up question to the hunger pains and dehydration. So where does that fit on the hunger scale? That's a really good question. I would say on the hunger scale, if you're getting down to like maybe a 3 and you feel like it might be dehydrated, that's when you can incorporate the glass of water. But if you're getting, or I'm sorry, if it's a 4, incorporate the glass of water. But if you're getting down to like a 3 or a 2, I would go ahead and eat a snack. But then when you're eating that snack, also drink a glass of water with it to kind of help fight off the dehydration. Okay, this is another question on intermittent fasting. Um, does mindful eating address intermittent fasting? It does not, but it is definitely something where you can incorporate components of mindful eating into intermittent fasting. Okay, so not sure how to listen to body before eating any food. I might have to remember how my body felt in the past after eating a particular food. So this is a really great comment because I think this is really helpful in understanding that this isn't something that you'll be perfect at overnight. It's definitely something that is going to be trial and error, especially if it's something where you're really used to eliminating a lot of different types of foods. Say you don't typically enjoy sweets or you're not going to eat ice cream, and you're going to be incorporating that back into your eating routine. It's really important to just kind of listen to how you react to those foods and how you feel. It's not going to be a perfect thing. You're not going to be perfect at it right off the bat, but it's something that you learn and adapt to as you're incorporating it more. And don't be afraid to enjoy food and you eat it and then you kind of look back and say, I didn't really enjoy that. That's an okay thing to do. I think it's about learning from that experience and then moving on. And kind of back to the mindfulness, it's identifying that emotion. It's not judging that reaction or that emotion. It's identifying it. I feel that way, and then it's moving on, and not really thinking about anything else. Okay. I do have some material So the question was, do you have any material you could email us covering the topics that you described in the webinar? So at the end of the presentation, I included some resources. I think I would definitely start there. And then from there, if you would like any additional resources, I'm happy to have you guys reach out to me, and I'm happy to send out additional resources if it's something you're interested in outside of what I included in the presentation. And then will we get copies of the slide? Yes, so there is a PDF copy in the handouts dropdown that you guys can access, and then we can also send out the slides to the email, the invite for this event. So this is a question, would you recommend combining mindful eating with keeping a food journal? I think yes, as long as you're doing the food journal to kind of help you track how different foods are making you feel, if that makes sense. If it's something where you're keeping the food journal to maybe help you keep track of how much you're eating so you can eat less, or it's helping you count calories, or it's helping you restrict in any way, I think that's where it could be non-beneficial for mindful eating. But if it's something that it helps you keep your head straight in enjoying different foods and how you felt while eating those foods, I think it could be a really helpful tool. Okay, let's see. Can you offer guidance for my five-year-old extremely picky eater? Particularly, he only eats sugary foods. He is unwilling to try savory foods. Absolutely. I know I'm very much in the weeds with this one as well. I would send you in the direction of the Ellen Sater Division of Responsibility. It's really helpful in giving you tools to know how to offer foods to your children while still giving them sugary foods, letting them enjoy sweets, but then also putting them in charge of how much they're eating. But I would also tell you it's very, very normal for kids about that age to only eat a handful of foods. That developmentally is very normal for them. And to just stay very diligent in offering those foods to them. Studies have found that you need to offer upwards of offer foods up to 18 times before they accept that food. So I think definitely I would look into the Ellen Sater and then just stay really diligent in offering a variety of foods to your kiddo. Okay, does mindful eating mean you should only eat when you are hungry? Also, how do you plan quantities of foods for meals to ensure keeping within mindful eating guidelines? No, mindful eating does not mean that you should only eat when you're hungry. That's where the different types of hunger, where I was talking about, you might be feeling hungry because you're stressed, but you're not actually showing physical signs of hunger. That does not mean that you should only eat when you're hungry, but I think it's more, it gives you the freedom to eat when you're hungry. So say you feel like you shouldn't already be hungry, I think it gives you more of that freedom to do that. And then to plan quantities of foods for meals to ensure you keep within mindful eating guidelines. That's where I think it's really important to ask yourself, how hungry am I? Am I ravenous that I could eat, feels like you could eat a whole horse, to steal that term a little bit. Or is it more just, I'm kind of feeling hungry, I could do with like a light meal and be just fine? That's where I think that question is really important, because that will help you identify how much to get and how much to put on your plate. But then also giving yourself freedom to go back for seconds if you're still feeling hungry is another important component there. These are all really great questions. Okay. Okay, it looks like I might have gotten all the questions. I'm very sorry if I did not answer your question. If I did not, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send out my email address to this presentation if there was any questions that did not get answered. I've taken up a little bit of over an hour of your time. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys found this helpful, and it's something that you can incorporate into your everyday. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.